We are continuing our Canada-wide NHL team preview for the month of December as we continue to trek east. Wait, where's east? East.
One of the
We're heading out to Winnipeg now to be joined by Sportsnet reporter Sean Reynolds. Sean, thank you for tuning in tonight. And how are you doing in the lockdown right now over in Winnipeg?
I'm doing great. It's we're having, I don't know about you guys, but we're having some pretty amazing December weather. It was +6 today. I don't know if I ever remember that happening at this point of the season. So yeah, we're, get out a little bit. It's not so bad. I mean, I'll take it.
Yeah, this was my outfit today. I wore a hoodie on December, what is it, 8th today?
Something like that, yeah.
Crazy times. 2020.
I went out to the garbage in bare feet, so this is my kind of
guy. I like that. We're going to jump into the Winnipeg Jets talk very shortly here. Obviously, the Jets are coming off, an interesting year. Kayla, go ahead and throw that board up for me if you don't mind, that preview board. Sean, take a look at your screen here, coming right over top of your face. We're going to put the Jets preview there. The Jets finished off last season with a 37-28-6 record. That's for 80 points. They're heading into the 2020 season with a hypothetical $0 in cap space. I always say hypothetical because a lot of things can change. They've added Derek Forbort, Dominic Toninato, Marco Dano, Dylan DeMello re-signed, but I'm including that as an addition. Paul Stastny comes over from Vegas. They lose Brian Little to LTIR. Jack Roslovich is a bit of a question mark right now. And then you got Eakin, Griffith, Kulikov, Lepon, and Spacek. Yeah.
Spacek.
There it is. Nice. Thank you. Mark Scheifele led the team in scoring last year, which is great because I have him on my fantasy team. And Cole Perfetti was picked with the 10th overall pick. Let's go back to Sean now. Sean, when I say those names and you see that board, addition, subtraction, maybe who stands out as a name that might impact the team the most?
Well, Stastny is the one guy that they've really been looking for that number 2C spot to be solved on a full-time basis for a long time. And so he comes back into a position that we know he was able to succeed in last time. We know what's been happening in the offseason with Patrick Laine and his interest in getting out of town. It's looking more and more as the season gets closer and closer like he's going to be with the Jets. As soon as they got Stastny, I thought that was a sign that they intended to keep him and put Patrick Laine with that centerman that he's been looking for or has been looking for since the last time Stastny left. And see if he can't put up some real big, dangerous numbers. So Stastny, I think, is a really big improvement for the team on that second line. It's going to do a lot for a player like Nick Ehlers, a player like Patrick Laine. It gives, the ability for them to shake up the top six. The Jets aren't really the kind of team that likes to do that. That top line is, almost etched in stone. Or has been in the past. But if they want to start juggling guys back and forth, they're able to do that. The other part about it that I think is, quietly very good in that pickup is Stastny's a really good defensive center, which this team needs to improve defensively in any way that it can. We saw what you put up on the board there. The name that stands out to me on the back end is Derek Forbort, not necessarily because I think he's going to be a major player, but he at least brings some size to a defense core that I thought really got pushed around in the playoffs last year. But I don't necessarily think he makes our defense core that much better. So if this team is going to take steps forward defensively this year, I think a guy like Stastny with his, play from the offensive zone to the defensive zone is where you can see maybe the Jets bumping up a little bit in that category.
For sure. And Sean, we've got kind of, again, Patrick Laine. It's funny. He's been kind of the topic of the offseason, especially in Winnipeg. Your last time on the RP show, again, hot topic of discussion, but what type of return is, I guess, a reasonable one for a 22-year-old who's already scored 40 goals. If he is going to get moved, like you mentioned, the consensus is he's probably going to be staying for at least the start of the season. What type of package, or I guess what position are the Jets going to have to be in to, I guess, get a reasonable return for a guy like him?
Well, I think they do. Their strength right now is wingers up top. You know, even with the players that they have, if you lose Line A, you know, there's a chance Jack Roslovic can move up there. Jensen Harkins looked really good, and I think is a guy who could be a real player in this league. Mason Appleton has shown, you know, some steps. So they have players that are going to be able to jump into that top six role if they lose that guy. So really, their strength up front is wingers. If they move Patrick Laine, they move from a position of strength. They got to address a position of weakness, and that's clearly the defense. I think if you're moving a guy who has the capabilities, and I fully believe one day Patrick Laine will be a 50 goal scorer, probably a couple times, if not more, in this league by the time he's all said and done. If you're going to go out and get a guy like that, you're going to want, you know, in return, if you need something on D, you probably want to make sure you're getting a 1A type defenseman in return. Now, maybe that player is a little bit young and isn't quite there, but you want a guy that you can see moving into that role. So I think it's one of the reasons why we haven't seen a move yet. Kevin Cheveldayoff, we saw him through the Evander Kane situation. We saw him through the Jacob Trouba situations where we knew these were talented young players who wanted out, and it didn't happen quick. He ground away at that until he got what he wanted. And so you can see they've got 3 more years of team control with Patrick Laine. He's not going to go unless Kevin Cheveldayoff gets what he wants in this situation.
Probably the best way to do that. Let's be real. They have the time. They might as well take it. And hopefully you can convince Laine that he doesn't need to go anywhere. He can play Fortnite in Winnipeg just fine.
The last time a Finnish guy left town, it was maybe not the best thing for the Jets. So.
We still feel the pain. We still feel the pain from that. I guess what I was going to say is the one thing that you have to worry about is, you know, maybe the chemistry in the dressing room. And so we saw that with Evander Kane when that situation happened. They kept him. They kept him in town. Didn't move him after he'd been asking for a trade for a while. And it finally boiled over and came to a head in where they were kind of forced to move him at that point. You don't want a situation like that. I just don't think Patrick Laine is the kind of player who's going to create that kind of situation. I think he knows the quickest way for him to get out of town is to go and put a whole bunch of pucks in the back of the net and make himself invaluable to a team who's going to come forward and offer a package that is going to lure him out of Winnipeg. And to me, he's just too prideful of a player. Patrick Laine is not the kind of guy who's going to go into a dressing room and make waves and cause problems and not put his best out on the ice. You're going to get his best no matter what, because he's a prideful guy and he wants to show you his best, and he won't accept from himself anything but his best. So compared to other scenarios, I think this is a low risk when it comes to maybe upsetting the dressing room. He's very well liked by his teammates. He's got really good relationships there. The fans in the city absolutely love him. They don't want him going anywhere. So if he comes and plays hockey, he's going to be just fine. It's a matter of him wanting out, though. And as I said on this show last time, I don't think that's going to change. I think Patrick Laine is already gone. It's just a matter of when he is gone.
For sure. And, you know, fun fact, we're talking about Teemu Selanne, kind of the memories of and the pain still there. Sean, tomorrow on the Rod Pedersen Show, tomorrow morning, I'm looking at the board. John Paddock is on the show tomorrow. He was the one that traded Teemu Selanne. So fun connection there.
Ask him about that.
I think Kilger forever.
Yeah. We have asked him about that on the Rod Pedersen Show in the past, I believe, and he references it all the time. If you ever talk to him, he's like, "Hey, I'm the guy who traded Teemu Selanne, so like I can do anything."
There's worse guys to beat too.
We have a question here. We'll incorporate the viewer questions here. Jamie Anstey is in Halifax, and he is asking, how many years do you see Nikolai Ehlers playing in Winnipeg? Do you see him being shipped out potentially if he doesn't fit the Jets team formula after this year or next? He is signed for a few more years, I believe. What do you think about that, Sean?
Yeah, I think he's got good value. I think he's got really good numbers. He hasn't hit the 30-goal plateau yet, but he always seems to be sniffing around that mark. You know, he's the kind of player, guys would absolutely love. And I do think that, you know, before the idea that Patrick Laine wanted out of town, I do think that the Jets at some point were going to move some of that strength that they had up in their top 6 wingers and move that to try and bring in some help on defense. I think he was probably a prime target to be that because Blake Wheeler is the captain and is going to in my opinion, I'd be surprised if he didn't retire as a Winnipeg Jet. And Kyle Connor, the organization, is just absolutely in love with the guy. He's not going anywhere. So it seemed to me that he was the guy. You had cost certainty for a number of years. He looked like a player who had a lot of potential that could go somewhere and maybe achieve, greater things than he's achieving so far in Winnipeg. I just think with the idea that Patrik Laine is probably at some point going to be moved out of Winnipeg, I think it becomes less likely that you move him. I don't think you'd want to move him. He's just one of those players that he gets his hands on the puck, and his zone entries and zone exits happen. It's a cheat code. You don't have to worry about giving possession away. He just skates it out, skates it into the zone with possession, allows the Jets to attack right off the bat. He's kind of everything you're looking for in a new wave NHL player. So I do think that there was a time that there, and we were hearing a lot of rumors with his name popping up when I think the Jets were looking for help on the back end. I just think now if that move is going to happen with Patrik Laine's representatives making it clear that he wants out of town, when that move does happen, it's a lot more likely that Patrik Laine's name is going to be involved.
Yeah, for sure. And you know what we alluded to a little bit earlier, right? The defense, right? You had Jacob Trouba exit last year, and it was that was the start of the decimation in Winnipeg on the blue line, and maybe a little bit unforeseen. Maybe it was in the marketplace anyways, but highlighted by Dustin Byfuglien's situation last year. Going to this year now into a new campaign, right? Have the Jets done enough to ensure that this blue line, as they currently have constructed, maybe there's a move to be made possibly before the start of puck drop, but can it hold up in this potentially ultra tough all-Canadian division?
Hold up. I don't know. Okay. If you take a look at what they did last year and consider that holding up, then yeah, I think they're going to be very similar to what they did last year. They held up last year because Connor Hellebuyck was the best goaltender in the league and absolutely saved them despite the really high quality chances they were constantly giving up. I take a look at this, and I think that most Jets fans looked at what happened in the offseason. They expected Kevin Cheveldayoff to try and make the back end better. I don't think that we've seen that. And I think that I think the one area where they see, if I see a pattern out of this team, I think what's going to happen is they're going to go into the season with the team that they have, and they're going to try and get by with what they have, just like they did last year. And they like to try and survive or float or hang around that playoff spot. And then when they get a little bit closer to the trade deadline, that's when they make their moves and try and shore up their areas of weakness and try and make a run that way. I could see them doing something similar this year. You had mentioned Brian Little not being available. Him not being available means that his $5 million plus contract is available for them to use if they need to this season. So that would be my expectation, is the Jets are going to enter the season. They're going to take and give a player like Ville Heinola, who's right now playing over in Finland, who came out of camp with the team last season, really impressed as an 18-year-old. They're going to give him every chance to make the team. A player like Dylan Sandberg may get an opportunity as well. I've said in the past, so I think this D-corps needs to be better, and I don't think it's fair to throw that all on the shoulders of a couple of young players like that. But what I do see is the Jets doing exactly what they did last season, trying to use their opportune scoring, that their top six, very, very impressive. Try and win some games like that, win some games with goaltending, stay in the fight, stay around that spot they need to be around the playoffs. And then if they are going to address things, I think rather than taking real assets and moving them out the door now, they'll wait till they get a little bit closer to the trade deadline and try and make those moves at that time without having to sacrifice any of what they have on paper at the moment.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned it a little bit there, but Connor Hellebuyck obviously coming off a Vezina season. They bring back Laurent Brossoit. So, they've had the same. Now they're going into a season with the same goalie tandem for, I think, the third straight season now. How comfortable does that make this team feel overall, knowing that, the two guys they have in net have been pretty steady for them the last couple of years?
Yeah, Lauren had a bit of a down season last year. He would be the first one to tell you. But, that's the confidence that this team has. They've known that for a long time, that when things get rough, they've got a guy who's quite often bailing them out. on the back end in Connor Hellebuyck. And I think it's interesting. 2 years ago when he was nominated for the Vezina and didn't win, and he signed that contract, a lot of people were worried, and I did a lot of radio shows, and people were asking about that contract, and maybe if the Jets had thrown a little bit too much out there just based on that one season that he had. The one thing I know about Connor Hellebuyck is the guy just, he's so obsessed with getting better. And we can say that about, pretty much any NHL player. It's the one thing they all have in common, but he really, really is near the top of the pyramid when it comes to those guys who just push and push and push themselves. He's not going to be happy with what he did last year. He's not going to be one of these goalies who sneaks up, wins a Vezina trophy, and then kind of disappears. He's one of those guys who wants to retire with 4 or 5 of those trophies on his mantle and is going to be putting in the work to get there. So I take a look at what he's done in 2 of the last 3 seasons and say that there's no reason for me to believe that there's going to be any kind of drop off or steep drop off in him. So again, he's the big giant eraser that corrects a lot of the mistakes that have happened on the Jets back end last year and even at times before that. So you've got that to lean on. To go back around and answer that question, the Jets are supremely confident with him backstopping them. And it really does, in my mind, make them a dangerous team.
I think a lot of teams around the league would look at $6.16 million for a Vezina winning goalie and be like, yeah, we'll take that.
Yep.
I think they're probably happy now, I would imagine. Now, Max, you have one about Paul Maurice.
Yeah, absolutely. So, from on the ice to behind the bench, Sean, and I mean, this has got to be fun covering the team anyways, with Paul Maurice being arguably one of the most quotable coaches in the entire league. In your time covering the team, maybe give us your highlight of his best soundbite. What's the one that sticks out in your mind the most as far as your time covering the team? And additionally, what do you think his main message is to communicate with this Jets team on day 1 of training camp, which is looking like it's going to be soon?
Oh, I'm not good with quotes. I'll say this, though. I just one of my favorite Paul Maurice moments. He's just so engaged with the reporter pool, and that's why you get the great clips that you get from him, because he's willing to engage, and he wants to engage, and he wants to kind of elicit laughter or elicit the response that he's getting. And I just remember personally talking with him a storyline that we'd followed a couple of years back about Andrew Kopp, how good of a high school quarterback he was, and how good he was as a football player. And Paul Maurice was up on the stand talking about it, and he said, seriously, Google this guy and go look at some of his highlights. So in the middle of the scrum, I kind of turned to my computer and started typing in and looked at some of the stuff that he was talking about. And he's just so engaged that through a room full of journalists, he looked over and saw that I was actually doing what he'd said and Googled it. And he was answering a question and kind of stopped what he was doing. He's like, yeah, okay. And then he just left and walked down to come down beside me. And everyone kind of came over, and we all just stopped and huddled around the computer and watched these highlights of Andrew Kopp throwing long bombs and running around the football field. And it's just that kind of accessibility that he has, where he's just, he asks you to do something and you do it, and he's like, okay, this is what I was talking about. And he kind of wants to come and show you and be a part of the whole thing. He's really, as a host on Hockey Night in Canada, we'll go in the afternoon before the game is coming. We'll have, Gary Galley or Greg Millen or a lot of the people who are over to cover the game. And he's just so good. I know with Paul that I can ask him a question behind the scenes, and he'll know from knowing me that I'm trying to get him to give these guys a lesson or something that he'd said in the past that I think is just really going to, allow them to tell a really good game story. And he's great at that. You'll ask him something and he's the ultimate, lob one in for him and he'll hit a grand slam. And that's what he does. You ask him the question and he'll just go, and you can see, I like to think that when we do our Hockey Night in Canada broadcast with the Jets, we tell really, really good stories throughout the broadcast. And Paul Maurice is an absolutely huge, huge part of that. To get back to the question you're talking about the team, I think the message is just always the same with this Winnipeg Jets team. it's always effort, effort, effort. And that's why Paul Maurice's teams usually last year, years before that, you usually get the best that you can out of those teams because those teams consistently give their best. That's one thing that he's really great at doing. It's one of the reasons he loves Blake Wheeler as a captain, because Blake Wheeler is constantly pushing to get everything he can get out of himself. And if people follow, they're going to get the best out of themselves. So that's always the message that you get out of Paul Maurice, is that if everyone there, despite what talent levels there are, despite what holes there are, if everyone there is pushing or pulling on the rope as hard as they can, the team's going to have success. And that's why you've seen that from this Jets team.
John Ohm in Winnipeg is watching, and he says, Paul is amazing. Clap emoji. Truly a special man. He loves the talk. He's actually blown up our comment wall. Yeah. Just for John Ohm. Connor is dedicated. What's with the rumor of Laine to the Kraken? The Jets need to make more moves. Brian Little's officially, and John Ohm's taking over the show. We'll save the Kraken questions for next time we have you on, Sean. We got to do this because... Oh, yeah, go ahead. No, if you have something, go ahead.
Well, my colleague Ken Wiebe and I actually were just doing some work on that. And the interesting part about that, and I said this the last time I was on the show, one of the problems with moving Patrik Laine is you need to move a guy who's going to make a lot of money, and everyone's having money problems right now. And next year, based on however this season goes, it may be the exact same scenario, which means there's not a lot of dance partners if you want to trade Patrik Laine and if Patrik Laine wants to be traded. The Seattle Kraken, however, are going to be a team that is going to be wide open and will be able to take on that kind of salary. So Kenny and I, and there's going to be some work that's going to be we're going to be posting online where we talk about this, but we talked about the fact that, that could be a potential trade partner for the Winnipeg Jets, as long as they could find something that would be the Jets would want coming back their way. But the tough part right now is money, and Patrik Laine is already making a lot of money. He's going to get paid a lot more by the time it's all said and done. The hard part is finding teams that have the money to take him on, and the Seattle Kraken are a team that are going to have wide open page to do that.
We were talking earlier before the show about Cole Perfetti, and obviously he was kind of the belle of the ball for the Jets in the 2020 draft. Yeah. In terms of the overall prospect pool for the Jets, not a lot of people talk about the Jets as a team that has one of the better ones in the league, but who are some of the names right now around the prospects, whether they just got drafted or maybe a couple years ago? Christian Vesalainen, I'm thinking of a name, someone like that. But who's a name that's getting Jets executives or people around the team excited right now in that prospect pool?
Well, I think Ville Heinola is the biggest. I mean, he was very impressive in his ability to put up points in his short stint with the Jets last year. He's a small guy, and he was playing as an 18-year-old. So the worry with small guys like that is how they'll be able to play in the man's game. And he didn't look like he had any trouble with it last year. And now he's gone out and had a year to put, beef up his frame. And there was a little bit of concern after he left the Jets because he went back to Finland and didn't seem to be performing that well, at least wasn't putting points up. But now this year in his season, he's really putting points up and is very impressive. Looks like he's going to be playing with Team Finland junior at the World Juniors. So if you want to see why the Jets brass is excited about him, take a look at him there. Christian Vesalainen is another guy I checked in with the scouts recently because he's starting to put up some numbers and kind of find himself. He kind of reminds me of Jesse Puljujärvi in that things just really went sour for him right away when he came to North America. And maybe going back home to Finland is exactly what those players need to kind of rediscover their game. It looks like in the case of both those players, Puljujärvi and also with Christian Vesalainen, that they're getting their feet underneath them. Talking to the Jets scouts, so there's still that big question mark of whether, Vesalainen is going to be able to have that translate on North American ice. And they haven't seen that from him yet. They haven't seen what they would have hoped to see from him at the AHL level. So he's a guy that, he's big. If you see, he can put up some really, really nice plays. He's a highlight reel type player. He's strong. He shouldn't have any trouble playing the man's game. But something just isn't clicking for him. If he can get that to click, he's the kind of guy that could really look like a steal, even though they took him in the first round.
Two more for you, Sean, and then we'll let you go. These are quick hitters. But first one, we're asking all of our pundits across this Canadian tour, all Canadian division, where do the Jets finish?
I've got them finishing fourth.
Fourth, okay.
I have them finishing.
I don't know
fourth.
if this is a Canadian thing, Sean, but everyone seems to be saying third and fourth so far.
Yeah, nobody's jumped up to the mound saying we're rolling.
I kind of feel like I'm just like sandwiching in the middle there and not trying to cause waves. But I take a look at it, and I think a lot of people think that Toronto is gonna. I think that's why you're not getting a lot of people saying that they're going to end up first. I do think the Jets are going to struggle like they did last year with their defensive framework. So I think that's going to be an issue. I take a look at a team like Edmonton, and I think they're going to be a little bit better than they were last year. Toronto looks to be okay. I think that Calgary has made some nice pickups and could be strong. Depending on what kind of performance they get from the Monahans and the Gaudreaus. And, based on what they did in the playoffs last year, Montreal looks like they could potentially be figuring something out, but they look like that every year during the regular season and then seem to have problems. But there's enough teams there that I think are making pushes that I think the Jets, as they are constructed with their defense, are a team that's going to be, trying to duke it out to get that fourth and final spot. Add some beef on the back end, and I think that totally changes anything. I think taking a look right across the Canadian division, I don't think there's a group of players when you take a look at that nucleus of the Scheifele's and the Wheelers and those guys who really, learned how to perform in the playoffs over the last couple of years. I think that they're dangerous in the way that I think they know playoff hockey better than any other team in the Canadian division, which could make them a very, very dangerous team. And I think that they're, again, always seem to be pulling on the rope at the same time, which is going to get the best out of them. That back end leaves too many question marks for me, which is why I think they're going to be duking it out for that fourth spot.
I like it. Yeah, right on the bubble anyways. But you know what? To finish it up, Sean, again, thank you very much for your time tonight. Clark and I were talking about it before the show. An awesome little social clip of Teemu Selanne donning their new reverse retros. We got to get your opinion on it. Where did the Jets either succeed or fail in your eyes in terms of their reverse retro release?
Okay, it takes me time to adjust to these things. I remember when I first saw the Jets logo when they came out with it, I didn't like it at all. To me, it looked like curling ring circles, or it looked like a target. And I thought they were literally putting a target on their player's chest. Now I look at it and it's clean and simple. I love it. So sometimes it takes a bit. When they came out with the new reverse retros, I looked at them and I thought, man, what a swing and a miss. And I think a lot of people feel that way. Now they're growing on me now that I see them more and more. They're starting to grow on me. Yeah. I think the one thing with the Jets is it's so tough for them to try and be creative because we are so locked into the nostalgic Jets movement here that, that's why everyone absolutely went bonkers over the Heritage Classic jerseys, because they just went old school Jets and people absolutely loved it. And then they did the whites and then they did the darks. And those typically will be most people's favorite two Jets jerseys. As long as there's the Teemu Selanne era Jets jersey out there that they haven't really explored, and maybe a little bit more so the color scheme of the Dale Hawerchuk jersey, I just feel like they're not going to be able to do anything. They tried with the Aviators, the Powder Blues. I'm not a fan. And I just think every time fans see it, they're just thinking, why don't you give us what we want, which is the 1993 era jersey or the 88 era jersey? And I just think it's tough for the Jets to try and be creative, because it would be easy to just go back and do that. And I think they want to try and make it their own. It's just so hard to do that because what people want is what they've already had.
Sure. And see, when I first saw it, I thought the exact same thing. I'm like, eh. And then I saw the picture of Teemu and I was like, oh, well. Yeah. But what I said from day one, if they would have just made that red instead of gray, I feel like it would have been an entirely different jersey. Yeah. I don't think they've gone red much in their history, have they?
Not as the main base, no.
So I thought a red might be really interesting.
Arguably, it would have fit in better with the reverse retro theme as well, right? When you're taking a look at the teams like the Devils, where they, took the striping of the green and made that the jersey, that's the striping of the red would have made sense. And I've heard it before. I don't know. There's just something I like about it when you see and you guys mentioned it in your last interview, when you see the full getup. Just the way that the white striping it plays off the darkness. I need to see them out on the ice in the game to really give a full opinion. But I'll tell you, right out of the gate, I thought, oh boy, they blew this one. I'm liking it more and more every time I see it.
All right. Well, Sean, awesome. I'm liking this interview more and more as we got into it. So thanks for joining us tonight. It was an awesome chat. We really appreciate you checking in and giving us a breakdown of the Jets.
Thanks a ton, Sean.
And anytime, guys. Thanks for having me.
All right.